Between October 2022 and October 2023, the Bureau of Labor Statistics recorded the largest wholesale grain price decline since November 2016. The Producer Price Index for grains fell 32.1%. The Producer Price Index for fresh vegetables fell 41.8%. The Producer Price Index for shortening and cooking oils fell 12%. Those are the documented input costs for the food sitting on American grocery shelves, not estimates, not projections. The Bureau of Labor Statistics' own verified figures for what it costs to produce the raw ingredients inside processed food. In those same 12 months, the Consumer Price Index for cereals and bakery products went up. For the third consecutive year, American households spent more on groceries than the year before. By 2023, the average household was spending $6,053 per year on groceries, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey, 15% above 2021 and roughly 28% above 2019. Spending continued above that level through 2024. That number has not reversed. This is the gap that requires explaining. The inputs got cheaper, the shelf price did not follow. A divergence opened between two price indexes that were supposed to move in the same direction, and that divergence has persisted across 2 full years of falling wholesale costs. What produced it is not a supply chain disruption and not a timing lag. It is a structural feature of how grocery pricing is built, how the supply chain is architected to move money before it registers anywhere visible, and why the same system that transmits cost increases immediately has no equivalent mechanism for transmitting cost decreases back. That architecture is where this story starts. In 1999, 2 small business owners testified before a United States Senate committee about the hidden pricing structure of American grocery retail. Both of them wore black hoods. Both spoke through electronic voice disguisers. Not because the subject matter was classified, but because both witnesses believed a grocery retailer would destroy their businesses if anyone in the room recognized them. What they were testifying about is called a slotting fee, a payment a food manufacturer makes to a retailer simply for the right to place a product on a shelf. The University of Connecticut's Food Marketing Policy Center estimates the total U.S. slotting fee market at above $9 billion annually, a figure that is difficult to verify in detail because nearly every slotting contract is confidential. When the Government Accountability Office attempted to study slotting fees formally in 2000, Lawrence Dyckman, the GAO's Director of Food and Agriculture Issues, testified to a Senate subcommittee. I have worked for the GAO for 31 years, and this is the first time I have had to report to a committee that I was unsuccessful in trying to carry out the work. Every retailer approached refused to cooperate. Slotting fees are one layer. Sitting on top of them is trade promotion spending, the system of temporary discounts, co-op advertising, and featured placements that consumer packaged goods manufacturers fund at more than $200 billion per year in the United States, approximately 20% of gross sales. That spending does not reduce shelf prices. It pays for visibility, position, and competitive exclusion. Above both of those layers is the software layer, and this is where the pricing asymmetry stops being a market outcome and becomes a designed output. Oracle publishes full technical documentation for its grocery retail pricing platform. The document runs under a section titled LPO Rules and Strategies, which stands for Lifecycle Pricing Optimization, and it is publicly searchable. Anyone can read it. What it describes, without particular emphasis, is a feature called the margin floor rule. Oracle's documentation classifies this as a hard constraint. The logic is spelled out plainly. Even when a competitor lowers their price, the Oracle platform will not permit the retailer to match that price if doing so would push the margin below a defined threshold. The system is not designed to pass cost savings to consumers. It is designed to protect and expand retailer margin, and those two objectives produce different outcomes in every scenario where input costs fall. The grocery industry's net profit margin of 1.6% is a real figure, and the industry cites it regularly as evidence of financial restraint. What that figure does not show is the gross margin, which runs 20 to 25% before labor and operational costs are subtracted. The distance between gross and net margin is where slotting income, trade promotion revenue, and software-enforced price floors accumulate before the numbers become publicly visible. In the year 2000, Sam Peltzman at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business published a paper in the Journal of Political Economy with a title that reads like a thesis: Prices Rise Faster Than They Fall. Peltzman examined 77 consumer goods markets and 165 producer goods markets. In more than 2 out of every 3 of them, prices responded to cost increases at least twice as fast as they responded to cost decreases, with that asymmetry sustained for at least 5 to 8 months after the initial cost shock. Economists call this the rockets and feathers effect. Costs rise like a rocket and descend like a feather. Peltzman's paper did not focus specifically on food, but the food supply chain has produced some of the most extensively documented evidence of the phenomenon since. In 2004, researchers Meyer and von Kramon-Taubadel conducted a comprehensive review of the academic literature on food chain price transmission in the Journal of Agricultural Economics and found asymmetric pass-through so consistently observed that the researchers described it in their own language as often considered evidence of market failure. A behavioral dynamic sustains the rockets and feathers pattern at the consumer level. People evaluate prices against a reference point, the price paid last time. When a price increase has been absorbed into that reference point and becomes the new normal, a subsequent decrease registers as a smaller gain than the original increase registered as a loss. This asymmetry in perception, documented in consumer research across multiple fields, removes the purchasing pressure that would otherwise motivate a retailer to lower prices once elevated ones have been accepted. A parallel mechanism works more quietly still. A 2025 Government Accountability Office report tracked product size changes across U.S. grocery categories between 2019 and 2024. In the cereal category, package size reductions accounted for 1.6 percentage points of the price increases recorded in that period, not through higher prices, but through smaller packages at unchanged prices. In household paper products, the figure was 3.0 percentage points. The Bureau of Labor Statistics now maintains a dedicated research index specifically to measure how much of reported food inflation is product downsizing. A smaller box at the same price is a price increase that registers in household budgets, but does not register as a price increase in the way most consumers think of one. Start with a specific product in a specific window. Between October 2022 and October 2023, the wholesale producer price index for grains fell 32.1%, while the producer price index for finished bakery products rose 4.9% in the same period. Wheat got substantially cheaper. Bread got more expensive. A box of cereal on the shelf in late 2023 did not cost less than it did in early 2022. In many categories, that box contained less cereal. The USDA's Food Dollar Series tracks where each consumer dollar spent on food actually goes. In 2023, the farm received 15.9 cents of every food dollar, down from higher historical levels as consolidation compressed the farmer's share. Labor captured 53.9 cents, down from a record 57.6 cents in 2020. Wholesale and retail trade combined took 26.1 cents, above the historical average of 24.5 cents. In a year when wholesale input costs had normalized downward, the layers that expanded their share were not the farm and not the workers. The Kansas City Federal Reserve published research in 2023 examining corporate markups during the inflation period and found that markups grew 3.4% in 2021, fast enough in the Kansas City Fed's own model to account for more than half of that year's consumer price inflation. The Kansas City Fed includes a precise qualification. This markup pattern has appeared in every post-recession recovery recorded since 1948. The pandemic cycle was not qualitatively unique. The scale was. The scale is visible in public financial filings. Between January 2020 and early 2024, the top 10 grocery and restaurant brand companies returned or committed to return more than $77 billion to shareholders. At the retail layer, the private label margin differential makes the arithmetic concrete. A store brand product generates a gross margin of approximately 35% for the retailer. The national brand on the same shelf generates 26%. Private label's share of U.S. grocery dollar sales climbed from 17.7% in 2019 to 21.2% in the first half of 2025, both figures all-time highs. In a market where input costs normalized but shelf prices held, moving volume toward higher-margin store brands at unchanged price points is not a neutral operational decision. It is the spread, collected through a different product category. The rockets and feathers effect and the margin expansion documented in the food dollar series both require one condition to persist: an absence of competitive pressure strong enough to force correction. At every layer of the U.S. food supply chain, the structural data on that competitive pressure produces the same finding. 4 companies, Tyson, JBS, Cargill, and National Beef, control approximately 85% of U.S. beef processing. 4 processors account for roughly 67% of pork. In breakfast cereal, 4 brands hold 80 to 85% of category sales. At the retail level, 3 companies, Walmart, Kroger, and Costco, generated approximately half of the $1 trillion in U.S. grocery sales recorded in 2023. The national 4-firm concentration ratio for grocery retail rose 458% between 1990 and 2019, according to USDA figures published in January 2023. A cost decrease at the farm, moving through that structure, does not generate the kind of competitive pressure that forces prices down the chain. There are simply not enough independent competitors at each layer for that pressure to build. The proposed merger between Kroger and Albertsons made the implications of that concentration unusually explicit. In October 2022, Kroger announced it would acquire Albertsons for $24.6 billion, a deal that would have combined roughly 5,000 stores and 700,000 employees. The Federal Trade Commission sued to block the acquisition in February 2024, and the FTC's core argument deserves to be stated precisely. The Federal Trade Commission was not claiming that Kroger and Albertsons had been fixing prices. The FTC's argument was that Kroger and Albertsons, as separate companies, represented the only meaningful pricing competition across dozens of regional U.S. markets, and that eliminating those two as independent competitors would remove the mechanism preventing prices from rising further. In December 2024, a federal judge in Oregon agreed and issued a preliminary injunction. Albertsons terminated the merger the following day. What the FTC's argument implies, and what the court confirmed, is that the competitive constraint that existed before the merger was already thin enough that its removal would cause measurable consumer harm. That is not a statement about a competitive market. It is a statement about a flaw that barely exists. A second structural concern runs alongside the concentration problem. Pricing algorithms deployed by competing grocery retailers are frequently built on the same platforms, trained on overlapping market data, and optimized for the same performance targets. A 2020 paper in the American Economic Review by economists Calvano, Calzolari, De Nicolo, and Pastorello found that competing pricing algorithms independently learn to sustain above-market prices through what the researchers called tacit coordination. The algorithms reached super-competitive pricing outcomes without any communication between the firms running them. The FTC stated its formal position in 2024. Price fixing by algorithm is still price fixing. In July 2024, the FTC issued mandatory information orders to 8 surveillance pricing companies that collectively serve at least 250 retail clients. By 2025, state legislatures across the country had introduced a wave of algorithmic pricing bills, with legal analysts tracking dozens of active measures. New York enacted a disclosure requirement in May of that year, the first state to do so. Grocery prices have fallen before, and the modern record contains a specific documented example. In 2016, food-at-home prices fell 1.3%, the first annual grocery price decline in the United States in nearly 50 years since 1967. In 2017, food-at-home prices fell another 0.2%. The USDA analyzed what produced those 2 consecutive years of actual deflation and identified 4 conditions that arrived simultaneously. Record agricultural output, a strong dollar-making domestic supply abundant, declining energy costs, and stepped-up direct price competition among retail chains. All 4 converged at once. The USDA described the alignment as unusual. By 2018, the conditions had separated and prices resumed climbing. Direct market entry by hard discounters is the one mechanism currently generating documented competitive price pressure. Research from the University of North Carolina's Keenan-Flagler Business School tracked pricing responses after Lidl entered U.S. markets and found that incumbent competitors reduced prices by an average of 9.3%, which is 3 times the competitive response typically recorded following a Walmart entry. Aldi is on track to reach 2,600 U.S. stores by the end of 2025 and has produced comparable effects in the markets it has entered. Both Aldi and Lidl price 30 to 40% below conventional supermarket levels. The competitive pressure is real, measurable, and limited to the specific markets those stores have actually reached. It functions as an exception to how the existing market operates, not through the existing market's own internal mechanics. The private label trajectory is a longer-term structural signal. When 80% of consumers surveyed in 2024 reported that store brands were equal to or better than name brands, and private label unit share reached 23.2% of all U.S. grocery sales, an all-time high. The price premium that national branded manufacturers have sustained for decades was under more direct pressure than at any point in a generation. A Rabobank analysis published in 2024 projected that U.S. private label share could reach 25 to 30% by 2033, moving the U.S. market closer to the United Kingdom and Germany, where private label regularly exceeds 40%. Some of that structural shift will pass through to consumers as lower effective prices. Some will convert to higher retailer margins on store brands. Both outcomes are happening simultaneously, in proportions that vary by category and by chain. The underlying architecture has not changed. The Oracle margin floor rule still runs inside the pricing systems of retailers that together generate $1 trillion in annual sales. The rockets and feathers asymmetry that Sam Peltzman documented across 77 markets in 2000 is present in the Bureau of Labor Statistics data from 2023. Concentration in beef processing, cereal production, and grocery retail sits at or near multi-decade highs, with no structural reversal underway. For the household that the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey recorded spending $6,053 on groceries in 2023, a figure that has not declined since. What that means is this: the price on the shelf is not where the market cleared. It is where the system settled through $9 billion in annual slotting fees, $200 billion in annual trade promotion spending, software-enforced margin floors, and supply chain concentration built over 4 decades. There are specific conditions under which some of those prices could move. A hard discounter entering your market, a private label shift eroding the branded premium at scale, a regulatory action requiring algorithmic pricing to operate with transparency. None of those conditions are automatic, and none are currently in motion at the scale the existing price level would require to reverse. The grocery store is not a broken market. It is a working one. What it was built to optimize for is a question the Food Dollar series, the Lawrence Dykman testimony, and 47 pages of Oracle pricing documentation now give you the tools to answer yourself. The pricing floor is just one part of the architecture. In our next investigation, we look at the 3% trap, the hidden industry taking a cut of every swipe. Click here to see the ground truth.